Hi, this is Denise Mathew, and today I'm going to make this unisex chain link bracelet. The nice thing about this design is that you can really change it up a lot. By just changing the size of gauge of your wire, you can make a bigger link, and if you wanted to make a smaller link, you can always reduce the gauge of wire and reduce the length that you're using. I've added beads to this bracelet, but you could go without the beads. You could also make a necklace of the same design. I've used 18 gauge wire with 1.5 inch lengths for the bigger one, and for the smaller one I still used 18 gauge wire, but I used 1 inch, and it really gives a different look. So let's get started. So I'm working with 1.5 inch lengths of 18 gauge wire. You could go up to a 16 gauge wire for a heavier gauge, or you could go right down to a 20, but I wouldn't go much lighter than a 20 because it may make it a little bit flimsy. And you can also adjust the length of wire that you're using to make a longer or shorter length. So all I'm doing right now is just making a loop on one end, and then after I have it on one end, I'm just going to go to the other end and make another loop. Sometimes your wire can get marked when you're working with it from your pliers, and if this is the case, you might want to wrap your pliers with some tape to prevent that from happening. Once you've made the loops, you want to make sure they're centered on the wire, so you're just going to use your pliers to sort of bring it to the center like I just did. Then starting at the middle, you're just going to bend both sides down around your round nose pliers so that the two loops meet. You want to make sure that the two loops are lined up side by side because you're going to be guiding your next wire through there. Just take your chain nose pliers and gently squeeze those two loops together. You want to make sure that they're side by side perfectly. And all single loops that you make will be made exactly like that. There are two ways to make the next links in your chain, and I'm going to show you both ways. First way is to just make a little loop like this. Then you're going to bend it right over your round nose pliers like you did before, but you're not going to go exactly in the middle because you want to leave a little tiny bit more wire on the non-loop side so you can complete the loop once it's already threaded through. And you're just going to thread that wire right through those two loops on the other link and push it right through until you get to the rounded part. Then you're just going to make a loop on the other side, and that will be the next link in your chain. And just like before, you just want to make sure those two loops are lined up side by side. The other way you can make another link in your chain is to just do another little loop like you did before. Then you're just going to slide it through those two loops of your last link. Then just do another loop on the other side. And then you're going to bend it over your pliers in the midway as you did before. This way can be a little bit more difficult when you make smaller links because you can't really get your pliers in well, so you can just decide which technique works best for you. So if you notice, I just bent it partial way, not all the way, because you want to make sure that you have space to do everything. So just slide your links down and then you can bring the two loops together. If you're going to make a chain that doesn't have any crystals or beads, this would be what you continue to do until you have the length you want. But I'm going to add some beads, so I'm going to show you how to do that right now. I'm using 10mm faceted acrylic rondelle beads. Pretty much any kind of bead will work in between these bracelet links. It's really your choice. I'm working with a 20 gauge wire. It's a wire to fit my bead, but you could also go a little bit smaller if you need to. So just make a loop on the end and just slide it through those last two loops that you just made. Then you're just going to close that loop and then add your crystal or your bead, whatever you're using. Once your bead is on, you're just going to do another loop, but you're not going to close it. Now, I'm just using a few beads in this design, but again, you can use more beads if you like or less. It's really your choice. Now, once you have your loop, you're just going to slide on another link like you made in the beginning. This time, instead of using the 2 loops, you're just going to use the rounded part of the link. And the reason why you do this is because it keeps within the pattern of the chain. After the link is on, you can add more links to that particular link, or you could add more beads. It's really your choice. I'm going to add a few more beads, and then I'm going to finish off with another 4 links for the ending. Now I'm going to finish most of this bracelet, and I'll come back to put it together. I've made another 4 links that are linked together, and I have also added 1 bead. Now I'm just going to add 1 more bead right now, and then I'm going to attach the other links to it, and then I'll put the whole bracelet together. So it's just a standard loop like before. Then you're just going to close the loop and add another bead, and then just another loop on the other side. And when you're adding the extra loops to the bead that you just did, you just want to make sure that you're keeping with the pattern. I've made the loops ahead of time, but if you want to make individual loops and continue making the chain like you did before, you can do that as well. I just did that to save time. After the chain is on, you just want to close that loop, and then we're just going to add the findings. Now, when you're measuring to make your chain or your bracelet, whatever you're making, and you want to have a particular length, you want to make sure that you take all the findings that you're going to use into consideration so that they are added into your length so you'll have the right length. So I have an S-shaped closure that I'm going to add in, plus I'm going to make a circle. If you prefer, you could use a toggle clasp, a regular clasp, or a lobster claw clasp, whatever you want. I'm just going to make a circle so it's easier for the S-shaped clasp to go in it. And I'm going to use that same 18 gauge wire I'm using, and I'm just going to make a loop with it. Just a small loop, not too huge. Then just attach it to the other side of the chain where you don't have your S-shaped clasp, and you're just going to close that up with just a couple wraps. Then you're going to use the largest part of your round nose pliers, or I have these multi-loop pliers that I'm going to use to make the bigger side of the circle. You're just going to do a 90-degree angle, and then you're going to wrap the wire around the barrel of your pliers, right around to the other side to make a bigger loop. Then you're going to do a couple wraps down, and you're going to wrap right down till you meet the wraps that you've already made on the lower loop, and that will make it look like it's all one wrap. When the 2 wraps meet, just trim it back and then tuck in all edges, and also push the wraps together with your chain nose pliers so it's nice and tight. You don't necessarily need to make this circle if you don't want. You can actually just add the S-shaped closure to the other side of the chain link, but I wanted to show you how to make it in case you wanted to use that in your design. And it's also really easy to use when you're opening and closing your bracelet. So this completes the tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and comment. We'll see you next time. Thanks for coming. Bye for now.